Hi, I'm Dan Herbert, course developer and tutor at Point Blank Music School. This is the fourth video in this series in which we're going to focus on the voice programmer within Rounds. We cover the different elements of Complete in our sound design courses and diplomas here at Point Blank. To find out more information on our courses in London, LA and online, head over to pointblanklondon.com and make sure to check out the other videos in this series. In the overview video, we covered the fundamentals of the voice programmer and how its operation is key to programming within Rounds. In this video, we're going to check out the power of the morphing feature and then look at how integral the progress modes are when programming sounds. The morphing feature opens up a whole range of possibilities and has the capability of smoothly changing the parameters from one sound to another and create some interesting and sometimes unexpected sounds as a result. And in addition, it can also morph in steps. So to enable morphing, we simply just click in the middle of a sound block. It's important to understand that morphing will only work between sounds of the same synth engine. So you can only morph analog to analog or digital to digital sounds. And the other consideration is deactivated cells will be included when a sound block is morphing. Now there are two morphing modes, global and block mode. Global will affect all sound blocks and there will only be one set of morphing parameters, or block mode allows the editing of the morph controls for individual sound blocks purely by just clicking on this arrow underneath. So if I load up this snapshot, which I've adapted from Dawn of Rounds from Soundscapes, you can see that it's in block mode. So let's click on this arrow, and now we can adjust the frequency of the morphing, and if I come all the way over to the left, you see the direction changes. So essentially there's an LFO controlling the morph rate. If we wanted to sync that rotation, we just click on where it says Hertz and then we can dial up a quarter note value. And now that rotates every quarter note. We can change direction just purely by dragging downwards, and we go to minus numbers. Let's come back up here and again we could find quarter note. Or eighth note will do for now, or whichever other value we'd like to set it to. It's also possible to re-trigger the phase of the morphing LFO by enabling this button. So it'll start from the same point of the waveform. And we also have over here a quantized control, which creates a stepped effect by only changing the parameters at a set time rather than continuously. So as I increase this, and the final two parameters here affect how long the morphing lasts for. I'm going to switch this to 1 and also switch the looping off here. So now if I play, what we find is it morphs from one sound to the next depending on the direction. If I change the direction here, it goes the other way. Now if I switch this to N, it will start at one cell and go all the way around and back to the original cell. Or if we want it to loop continuously, we click on this button here so it switches to an infinity symbol. And now it morphs continuously. We can also loop when it's just switched to 1. And now you can see it looping between the two cells. So it's well worth exploring the potential of morphing using the different poly modes. So if I switch it back to monochord, then you can see how it just moves around in unison. However, if I select multi-chord and hold a chord, then the different voices morph independently and you get a varied sound. So I've just been focusing on one sound block, but if I just enable B to start with, you can hear it's got different morph settings. And now let's re-enable A. So if I hold down 2 notes, and now play 2 more notes, it jumps onto B. 2 more notes. You can hear the combination of the different morph settings of A and B and how we're creating these constantly evolving sounds. So now let's check out how the progress modes work, and it's important to understand how the different combination of voice and progress modes affect how notes are allocated to the different sound blocks. So I've called up Latin Electro from the multitrack sequence bank. In this snapshot, layer mode and monochord are enabled, which means it will play back up to 4 sounds simultaneously. So if I hold a note, you can see it's playing through all 8 sound blocks. So this is a sequence sound, and that is determined by this menu here. So if I switch this to note and now play a note, it just plays one sound. So I'm going to play repeatedly. So you can see each time I play a note, it progresses onto the next sound block. Now, if I switch it back to sequence and slow it down so we can hear what's going on. Now, the other parameter, which is really important here, is count. So at the moment it's set to auto. If I pull this down and set it to something like 2, this means it will play 2 notes before progressing on to the next sound block. So we're now progressing through 4 sound blocks and then it repeats. If I set the count to 4, it's now playing 4 notes every sound block. Let's just bring this back to 2. So you could see there it was only playing 2 different sound blocks, and that's because we've also got a reset parameter which is set to a bar. So when it plays up to a bar length, then it resets and jumps back to the beginning. If I set this to 2 bars, it now plays all the way through, or 1 bar will only play halfway through. And you saw there it reset at the beginning. That's just because it's got its own internal clock, or when you're running it within a DAW, it'll be synced to the host DAW. It's also possible to turn the count off, and this is most useful for when you're using remote octave, which we'll cover in the final video. So in sequence mode, the notes and progression are synchronized depending on the count setting, and if we switch it to time mode, then now the progression is determined by a specific amount of time. So if I set this to quarter note, you can now see it's progressing through each sound block every beat. So if I play 16th notes, the progression is not linked to how many notes I play, it's determined by a specific duration, and we can also specify how often it resets. So let's switch this back to sequence mode now. So the voice modes also affect how it progresses through the different sound blocks. At the moment it's on layer mode. So if we switch to rotate, let's set count to say 2, and now hold down a note. It plays 2 notes on each sound block and rotates round. If I choose count 4, again it plays 4 notes on each sound block before moving on to the next. Rotate, reset. You'll see it starts at exactly the same point each time it moves on to the next sound block. If we switch to auto, pushing all the way up to the top, then it will play for however many cells are activated before moving on, and depending on the sound selected can create some interesting patterns. So on A, 3 cells are activated, plays for 3 and then moves on to B. It's simple to edit the sound blocks, and we can easily assign one of the 16 sounds to each cell simply by selecting a sound in the soundbar and then clicking on a number next to an individual cell. You'll notice a circle appears around the number, which indicates you can undo this assignment simply by clicking on it again. There are two different modes for assigning. It defaults to paint mode, but we can also select replace. And now you can see all cells which are assigned to the sound I've got selected have a dotted ring around them. And I can easily just switch them to a new sound just by selecting a sound, and you can see they're being updated. But let's switch it back to paint mode for now. You can easily copy or move a sound block by right clicking and then hold and dragging. So I could drop that onto C, and that now duplicates A. Or I can also drag it along and insert it, and you can now see it's shuffled the sound blocks along. You can also rotate the cells just by right clicking and then dragging down to rotate it anti-clockwise, or drag it upwards to rotate clockwise. When programming in sequence sounds, if you want to program in a different rhythm, then you can't just deactivate a cell, because then it will just skip. So what we actually need to do is to turn down the volume. So let's assign sound to this cell here, and just solo A by right clicking. So to mute to, what we do, we've got sound 2 selected, come over to level and then turn it down. So hopefully you can see the potential here when programming within rounds, and how the voice programmer gives you so much control how the sound changes and develops over time, from rhythmic step sequences through to evolving complex textures.